The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jay Parsons, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to this evening's webinar, Farm Security and Crisis Management, Do's and Don'ts in Hiring. This webinar is being offered in cooperation with the American Sheep Industry Association and the Rebuild the Sheep Inventory Committee. We would like to thank them for their funding support and encourage each of you to visit the American Sheep Industry Association website at www.sheepusa.org to learn more about the American Sheep Industry, the association, and the various resources they have available for you. On the ASI website, under Issues and Programs, you will also find a link to the Rebuild program. The Rebuild the U.S. Sheep Inventory Program is a part of the American Sheep Industry Association Let's Grow initiative. And it is on the Let's Grow website that you will find links to a number of resources, including recordings of previously offered webinars and various educational materials pertaining to sheep production and marketing. If you want to access that website directly, you can do so by typing in the URL www.growourflock.org. I want to inform our listeners that this evening's webinar is being recorded and will be available for later viewing. All registrants for this webinar will receive a follow-up email in the next 48 hours with a direct link to the recording as well as a link to access the slides used in the presentation. We're slated for a 45 to 50-minute presentation, which should leave us about 20 minutes at the end for questions. Feel free to send in your questions as we go by typing them into the question dialog box on your control panel. We'll wait till the end of the presentation before we start working our way through those questions, and you'll be able to type in more questions during the Q&A session. You'll also be able to raise your hand and turn on your microphone and speak directly with the presenter if you prefer to do so. I'll go over that again as we start the Q&A session. With that, it is my pleasure to introduce this evening's speaker, Kay Johnson-Smith. Kay is President and CEO of the Animal Agriculture Alliance. A native Virginian, she's been with the organization for 20 years. Under Johnson-Smith's leadership, the Alliance has become a respected and recognized coalition able to quickly and competently bring the entire livestock industry together to address pressing issues and collaborate for the greater good. Kay's talk tonight is titled Farm Security and Crisis Management, Do's and Don'ts in Hiring. And with that, it's my pleasure to turn the microphone over to her for what I'm sure will be an entertaining presentation. Kay, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you, Jay. Thanks for the introduction and the opportunity this evening to be here. And also thanks to American Sheep Industry Association for hosting this event. ASIA is one of our members on our board of directors and actually one of our early founding members back in the 1980s. So I am very appreciative of the opportunity. I'll start with just first giving you a brief overview of what the Animal Ag Alliance is, what our role is, how we are different from the other organizations that participate among our membership, and then talk about sort of the motives of undercover activists and why it is important to be very diligent in your hiring process. And then also talk about some tips that we've learned through the years of monitoring these issues, monitoring the undercover and other animal rights campaigns, and that I think will be very practical and useful for going forward as you hire individuals to work on farm and to ensure that you're hiring people that are there for the right reason and not to for the motives of reporting to animal rights activists. So with that, let's just start with our organization's mission is really to monitor animal rights and other activist detractor groups and to work proactively to engage in those same spaces in order to provide a counter voice for the total animal ag industry to correct misinformation by the activist organizations. Our real role is to connect the industry across the food chain because animal welfare issues are important to all of us, and the animal rights groups target every sector of the animal ag industry and the food industry. We also work to engage influencers who can help get our voice out to the general public, and ultimately to protect the ability for farmers and ranchers to keep farming and ranching, and consumers ability to make choices that fit their values and their budgets. So our role really is all about bringing everyone to the table for good. So before I talk about some of the tactics of the groups and get into the whole some tips for hiring, I think it's really important for us to examine the motives of these groups that we would consider our opposition groups, and why are they out to really create a negative image of animal agriculture. So one of the activities that our organization does is monitor these various organizations, whether it's PETA, the Humane Society of the U.S., Mercy for Animals, Compassion Over Killing, the Humane League. There are hundreds of animal rights organizations in the United States. And ultimately, most of these organizations have the exact same goal, and that is to create a culture where we, as a society, eliminate meat, milk, and eggs from our diet, or eliminate animal products for any purpose, whether it's clothing or other purposes. By attending their events, we have captured a number of quotes by these individuals who present themselves to the public today as being very mainstream, or being more focused on just improving animal care. But really, when they are speaking to audiences that are much more in their mindset of animal rights, they're much more open about what their real agenda is. And so, as you can see on the screen, Paul Shapiro, who's Vice President of Farm Animal Protection with the Humane Society of the U.S., originally he was the founder of a group called Compassion Over Killing, a very extreme organization. And he has said numerous times that nothing is more important than promoting veganism. Josh Balk, who is their Director of Corporate Policy for HSUS, he's the person who typically goes and meets with corporate executives of food companies or companies that HSUS has bought shares of stock in. And ultimately, I think you see his feelings is that the way for farm animals to be happy is if we just stop eating them. And then Nathan Runkle, who is founder of Mercy for Animals, which is one of the most active groups in recruiting and getting individuals hired on farms strictly for the purpose of creating undercover video. He has even said that the lifeblood of his organization is the undercover investigations of animal agriculture. So it's really important to see the motives of these groups, that they are all about creating change, promoting animal rights, and creating a vegan society. And this is why they utilize the various tactics that they do. Ultimately, their goal is to create a wedge between the farm community and the general public, so that there is a sense of distrust, of carrying out the term factory farming, and creating concerns about either food companies, retail organizations, policymakers, and even investors in companies. And I think this quote here sums it up. To end animal agriculture, the movement has to drive down demand and raise the cost, and people will stop purchasing so much meat, thus bringing about an end to the industry. And you could exchange the term meat for wool, or for other types of clothing that come from animals. So I think it's easily transferable regardless of the animal ag industry. Ultimately, again, through our monitoring, we've been able to trace these various organizations and how closely they work together, how they share funding, how individuals have moved from one organization to another, and really solidifying the fact that these groups may have a different appearance on the outside to the public, some appearing to be more mainstream or really animal protection oriented, when ultimately they have the exact same goals, and that is eliminating animal agriculture altogether. In the U.S. today, there are hundreds of animal rights organizations, and if you combine their budgets collectively, it's well over $400 million annually. And you have to remember, these groups are not producing services or products, and they are not spending their time developing services that are, or products that are used by the public, but rather this money is contributed as tax-deductible donations, and it is going toward public relations smear campaigns, it's going to lobbying efforts, it's going to food scares or health scares to try to frighten people away from eating meat or consuming or utilizing products that come from animals. They're very strategic today. Some are very open about their agenda. Groups like PETA, I would say, they're very open about the fact that they don't approve of eating or using animals for any purpose, and they feel that all people should be that way. Other groups are much more deceptive about their agenda. Groups like the Humane Society or ASPCA or the Humane League. And if you look at their websites today, they appear to be very positive and just all about improving animal care. But ultimately, their agenda is exactly the same as PETA's, and that is to eliminate the use of animals for any purpose. So there are many, many tactics used by animal rights organizations today, but one of the most effective and most utilized tactics today are undercover videos. It used to be that individuals would break into farms and in the dead of night and break into doors or release the animals and capture video. And what they learned is that tactic was not garnering sympathy with the media. They weren't able to get their story out that way. And so they decided to go a different route, and that is to actually get individuals employed on farms to produce undercover videos. I think it's very important to remember that none of these organizations have any legal authority, nor have they been designated by any local law enforcement to have any sort of authority to do undercover videos. This is strictly a tactic that they use that is deceptive, that is fraudulent, and yet if they can get hired on the farm and capture anything that they can manipulate the narrative or potentially capture something that is mistreatment of animals or mishandling of animals, then they can take what is maybe hours and hours of video and turn it into a very emotional, very traumatic 30-second clip. There have been a lot of stories in the media. Even Time Magazine a few years ago did a very in-depth story about an undercover activist who refused to release his identity, and yet he was perceived as being a martyr because of the time and the type of work that he does and how hard it is to go on farms and so forth. And so you see him pictured here with his glasses and his hat. But he's been able to have gotten hired by numerous farms over the years because of the various hiring tactics that they use and because of unsuspecting and honest farmers who really need help in hard times and really, are willing to hire people thinking that they're there for the right reason. But these videos continue to be produced and they go on, and in the last 10 years, or in the last 20 years, there have been over 82 undercover activist videos either on farms or meat processing plants or in shearing operations between here and just Canada. Of those, over 70 have been produced in the last 10 years. And the reason is it is big business for these activists. They use it for fundraising. They use it to support their agenda, whether it is a legislative agenda or tying these videos to retailers that have brand names or food companies that have brand names in order to cause these companies to create change down the line or to drop contracts with farmers because of fear of having their brand associated with something negative. The Animal Ag Alliance, again, has traced these videos. You can go to our website and you see here sort of the caption or the graphic for each of the types of farms that have been traced. And the reason we make this available on our website is to demonstrate a pattern of tactics that these groups use. Mercy for Animals has been very open about actually advertising for more undercover animal and so-called investigators. And you see on the right-hand slide here where they actually are posting a job description where they are offering $800 a week plus expenses to individuals who will work for them to try to obtain employment on farms. $800 a week plus expenses. So assuming somebody did get hired, they would be hired by a farm, paid their wages to do their job on the farm, or in the plant, and then they're also being paid by Mercy for Animals. The Humane Society of the U.S., you see on the left side of the screen, has used these so-called undercover investigations as a fundraising tool, which is really one of the main purposes for these undercover videos. It is to fundraise to supposedly help them continue their business, but you show pictures that are very emotional, that appear to be very negative, and the narrative that it always goes with these videos, regardless of how edited they are, is extremely negative, and of course it tugs at the heartstrings of the public, and they know that that will help bring in funding for them. HSUS in October released a couple of new services that actually will enhance their ability to capture videos. One being a whistleblower program where they're encouraging employees of farm businesses to call an 800 number to report abuses, and any sort of abuse that leads to a prosecution, they will pay that individual $5,000. So it's an encouragement to get involved in reporting and or potentially reporting data to their 800 number that may or may not be factual. We have no understanding of how it's verified, how the information is used, and what they do with the data once it's collected. They've also worked with the National Sheriff's Association with a new smartphone app called the ICE Black Box to allow anybody to be an undercover investigator with their smartphone by using this app. If they capture something that they appear or that may appear or that they think could be mistreatment of animals, then you videotape it and you can upload it right through this app directly to the National Sheriff's Association or local law enforcement. Once again, we don't know how the information that would be captured is verified. We don't know what happens with that information. I've tried to reach out to the National Sheriff's Association and to set up a meeting to try to find out more information about this, and unfortunately have not gotten any response to date in response to my request. So again, just quickly back to these undercover videos. Why are undercover videos so successful? Of course, with social media today and the internet and YouTube, it just takes a matter of seconds. From the time you upload a picture, create a very negative narrative, most likely a false narrative about what's happening in the video, and you can make all kinds of disparaging claims about how farm animals are treated on farms today. And it's a matter of sharing it in seconds, whether it's Twitter or Facebook, again, YouTube, Instagram, the internet. It can be shared not only in your community, not only in your state, but across the entire world. And it's not just a matter of maybe how your customers are looking at it, but it's also a matter of how are other countries perceiving agriculture in the U.S. and what impact will that have on trade, what impact will that have on sales and so forth to companies that are more global. And the activists know this. Social media has been their best tool in getting their information out. They've also used these videos to drive a lot of state legislation in the past 10 years. And there are a number of states that obviously have introduced legislation strictly as a result of these sorts of undercover videos. Many companies have made announcements over the last several years, last 3 years I would say in particular, about their sourcing and the types of products that they'll source, or the types of products that they require that their products come from farms that do have certain practices in place, whether it's with regard to housing systems or not having housing systems, whether they're exposed to the elements, or types of food, whether or not antibiotics are used, and you name it. But there are more and more companies just every month that are making announcements that are changing how they are sourcing the products that they buy, again, as a result of the pressure from the various animal rights groups, and in particular these undercover videos. So these are just some examples of some of the companies that have been targeted by animal rights activists and have made sourcing choices or sourcing policies for their suppliers strictly because of animal rights videos. The Wall Street Journal just in late January did an article on the business side of animal rights. And so not only are these videos being used to target the companies that buy farmers and ranchers products, but they're also targeting the investors in those companies to question whether or not investing money in a company that utilizes animal products is a good financial risk because a company does not have strong enough animal welfare policies for its suppliers. Two organizations that partnered to create this report that you see on the right, the Business Benchmark for Farm Animal Welfare, and this is a independent report created by two international animal rights organizations, World Animal Protection, which formerly was called World Society for Protection of Animals, and Compassion in World Farming. And these groups partnered for this project. They did an independent analysis of 80 companies worldwide that utilize animal products from farm animals and gave them grades based on what they perceived their animal welfare policies were. This report was then mailed out to all of the investors in these various companies, again trying to drive change from the investor side of these businesses down through to the farm. This is a reference to an article and an interview done by Matt Prescott, who is also with the Humane Society of the U.S. And the interviewer specifically noted in here that Prescott, or you could interchange that for HSUS or PETA, accomplishes their wins by playing both to the fears and desires of corporate executives. And the fear is having your brand company associated with anything negative, in particular any sort of animal cruelty. And the desire is, well, maybe if we work with them on this one issue, maybe they'll support us, maybe they will go away, maybe they will leave us alone. But I guarantee you, having been in this business and watched the pattern of how these organizations operate for over 20 years now, that if a company works with these organizations, then today it's eggs, tomorrow it's gestation stalls for crate, the next day it will be elimination of all wool in products that they purchase, or elimination of lamb, or eliminating a particular food product because they are not, don't have the strength necessarily with the public, the buying power. So it's, they won't go away. This is not, appeasement is certainly not a way to get rid of these organizations from targeting your company. So how do farms protect yourselves from hiring these undercover activists? They're very sneaky, they're very shrewd about getting hired. Many of them will say they have farm experience, and today many of them actually do have farm experience. So when they check that box or they tell you that they have worked on farms, many of them have, and they go from farm to farm, region to region around the country. So if they've worked on a farm, let's say in Nebraska today, probably 6 months from now they're going to show up trying to get hired on a farm in New York, or they'll head south and go to farms trying to get hired on farms in Georgia. And we've seen this pattern. These same individuals continue to show up in different regions of the country, but they, in every single case, leave employment of the farm before the video comes out. Every single case. And that is so that you have no recourse to talk to them, to include them in an investigation, or to go after them in any sort of legal means for having presented themselves fraudulently in the employment process. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some things you all can do that I think maybe you just need to think about, incorporate into your business practices for hiring, incorporate into your business practices on the farm. And so really it is taking a whole new look at your business and your farm practice with your eyes wide open. Today we all have to live as if we were on YouTube 24/7. There are cameras everywhere. You see it on the news reports. There are cameras everywhere that most people don't know about cameras. So regardless of these videos, it is crucial to every farm to do everything they can to do things right and to kind of look at your business from an outsider's perspective, to dot all the I's, cross all the T's, to ensure that you are constantly striving to do the right thing, because you never know where those cameras may appear. We have learned many of these undercover cameras can be as simple as being in eyeglasses that someone wears, or a button on a shirt. Cameras can be that small. Many of the activists have had cameras on belts under their clothing that actually can penetrate the clothing and capture video that is just as if you had your camera pointed directly at it. So you never know where cameras are going to be, and beyond just worrying about whether what's being captured on the camera is going to be seen as bad, it's just good practice and good business to take a look at everything we do today to see how it looks from an outside perspective, because public opinion does matter. And again, back to that slide with how fast information can spread with the internet. Everything that you can do to prevent being that next YouTube sensation is certainly worth, I think, the dollars and time invested up front. So take a look at your animal care handling and animal care issues. Are there issues? Do you have problems getting shearers to come on board? Can you trust the shearers that you bring on to take care of your sheep? Have you done all the homework to ensure that the facilities that they have and the tools and equipment that they are using are the most current, that are working properly, and that hopefully will not cause any concerns themselves when you're working with your animals? If you don't know how to manage certain situations, seek outside counsel from animal handling specialists. Many universities now have animal behavior specialists, so I would encourage you to work with those individuals at the various universities to seek their guidance, their assistance, and their consultation in creating the best animal care program for your particular business. And then implement animal care and handling programs on your farm, and create some documented best practices that create protocols for your employees and create some structures so that employees know what to do and what to expect from you. Also take a look at the environment. Are there buildings that are dilapidated that are on the farm? Maybe they're not in use anymore, but let's just say there's a drone flying over, and that is one of the tactics the activists are looking to use, drones to capture undercover video. If a drone were to fly over or a plane were to fly over, what is the view from the sky? Maybe you just need to go on Google Earth and download your particular land and region and see what does it look like from the outsider's perspective. Are there things that are in places that could be misperceived to be inappropriate or too close to water or creating hazards? And one example here in the Washington, D.C. area, or the East Coast just a few years ago, there was a plane with activists flying over a particular poultry farm out in the Delmarva region and captured pictures and video, and ultimately sued this farm, saying that that there was manure too close to the water. Well, actually, as it turns out, it was minerals. It was not inappropriate where it was placed on the farm. However, from up above, it looked like it was. And this particular farm family spent years in court fighting this battle. They ultimately won, but that doesn't mean they didn't go through years of heartache, years of legal fees, and fighting for their good name and reputation in their community. It was extremely detrimental to this family's business and so forth. So fortunately, things came out positive for them, but if you can avoid those types of situations, all the better. Conduct your own self-audits. Go through and ensure that your employees are doing what you're carrying through with your expectations and with your protocols for animal care. Even conduct your own undercover audit. Hire somebody yourself who's working for you but out working with your employees, managing the animals, to come back and report to you, are things being done the way that you expect them to be done. At our upcoming Stakeholders Summit in May in Kansas City, We've invited a speaker who is a dairy farmer from California who was featured on one of the shows, Undercover Boss. If any of you have seen that, he was the only individual in the farm, of this farm family, that knew that they were participating in this show. He took a risk, and the president of one of his customers actually was the undercover boss, came out to the farm, and as it turned out, the farm was doing everything right. It created a very strong relationship with one of his best customers, and improved their relationship, improved their open chain of communications. But if you can do that yourself, we think that that's the most valuable, because you don't want to find yourself the feature of one of these undercover animal rights videos. And then identify vulnerabilities in your hiring protocols. Are you just accepting people when they walk in at face value as to who they are and what their motives are? Are you finding yourself in situations where you haven't planned for a shortage of employees, and all of a sudden you need to hire people very quickly, so you haven't given yourself enough time to do the due diligence to ensure that they're the right people? So look at your hiring protocols. What are your requirements? And I'm going to talk a little bit about what those should be in order to help you prevent hiring an undercover activist. So, it really is about protecting your animals and protecting your business. And so when people are coming to you seeking a job, you need to thoroughly screen all of these job applicants. Know who you're hiring. Require that they give you references, check their references, and then if you can, do background checks on these individuals. There are a lot of red flags to look for, and again, having monitored these videos, so many videos over the last couple of decades, these patterns of red flags are in almost every single case. Look for people who are showing up saying, I only need to work for 6 months, or I only need a job for a few months because I'm trying to make extra money for XYZ, for a vacation, or for traveling to see grandma in Europe, or I'm only here for temporary time because I'm visiting my girlfriend and just need the extra cash. There are lots of excuses for why people need temporary work. Often these individuals are willing to work for free. The excuse that they say is that they are there to learn about the business. They're thinking about it, buying into a farm. They're thinking about starting a sheep business, but they'd like to know a little more about it first. So they're willing to work for free just to learn about it before they make the investment. Individuals who come in, who drive up to your farm with out-of-state license plates. First, you might want to question, how did they know my farm was here? And they're from out of state. Why are they here in this rural area, this small town, looking for work? So that should, certainly raise some red flags for wanting to know more about who they are. Stories about moving to the area for a girlfriend or a boyfriend, and there are a number of undercover activists who are women, and it's kind of split. I would say there are more men, but there definitely are a number that are women, so that is frequently a story that's used, that they're moving to the area for a boyfriend or girlfriend and are looking for work. The use of a college or just a university identification. So think about it. It's very logical. They drove to your farm, and yet they're providing you only a college ID for their ID. Obviously, if they drove, they should have a driver's license or some sort of legal identification as opposed to just a college ID. Overly or inappropriately educated for the position they've applied for. So again, think about, they have a college degree, but yet they're looking to do a job that is very labor intensive and certainly inappropriately fits with what their education background is. Those are just a few of the red flags to look for. Some things that we recommend that every farm do, and that is require applicants to complete a written application. And we're working on, the Animal Ag Alliance is working on some questions that certainly can be included in a written application form for you to help vet out some of the potential activists or threats to your farm. Require that they provide you some references and ensure that you follow up with those references. Unfortunately, way too many times I've had conversations with businesses that have been targeted by these undercover videos, and they say, yes, we saw the reference, they said they worked for XYZ Farm, but then when they actually call the number after the fact, after they have found out that the video has been made, the phone numbers ring to false numbers, they ring to numbers that have been disconnected, and or they're completely different businesses listed on the farm, or the individual may have listed a farm but has never worked there. Include a statement on the application that has to be signed by all employees that says all information provided on this application is true and correct under the penalty of perjury. They will sign it. It's not going to prevent the undercover activists from signing it, but it will make them think twice about it. It makes you a harder target for them to penetrate, or they will appear to be more nervous potentially in signing it because they recognize by signing that is a legal agreement. Write on the application that you require consent for a background check, and again, have them initial it or sign it. Whether or not you do the background check, that's up to whether or not you have the resources to do it. But the fact is that you have that on there and that you're asking for their consent in order for them to do a background check. Again, it may send shivers up their spine. It may mean that they won't sign it. And if they refuse to sign it, regardless of whether they're an undercover activist or otherwise, it's probably not a good candidate for your job. Verify employment of the applicant's permanent address. Note if there are gaps in an employment on their resume, if they provide a resume, and inquire why are there gaps. And again, the more you can make them talk, the more they're likely to feel nervous, or it's important to read their body language when they are responding to those types of questions. If they list that they've worked on farms, or if in the job interview process they say yes, they've worked on farms, and they talk about the different kinds of farms, listen to the language that they use. Does the language sound like somebody who has had experience working on a farm? Are they using formal language that they probably researched on the internet, or are they using language that really fits the type of farm and the type of job that you have? Also, if they do list farms that they've worked for, call those farms and verify that they are who they say they are. Often the activists will use the same name going from farm to farm, but so if you call and all of a sudden these people say yes, but this was somebody who was an undercover activist, you've saved yourself a lot of heartache if they know that, and or if you know that in advance. So verify employment. Again, a lot of times they'll list a name of a farm that doesn't exist. It's something that's made up, and it's important for you to research it to make sure that that the business is legitimate and has truly hired this individual in the past. You can require individuals to sign a confidentiality agreement so that they are verifying that they're not there to capture proprietary information about your farm. You can state at the opening of it that if they breach this confidentiality agreement, they may be responsible for paying your attorney's fees in the end if you need to hire attorneys. Include a pledge that they have to sign that says that they will not film or photograph anything on your farm or in your business without the permission of you as an employer, and to recognize that all film and photos that are taken while employed there are the property or your property. And then it's important to let these employees, all of your employees, know that background checks, any sort of certification, false statements, anything that you're doing to monitor them that they're aware of, make sure that they sign the agreement, and if they refuse to sign, again, this should be a red flag that this is probably not a credible person or a good person to hire on your farm. So in the interview process, what are some of the questions that you can use to vet out credibility of the individuals or to vet out whether or not they may be there for the wrong reasons. So ask the question, you know, I would advise you, the Animal Ag Alliance is not, I'm not an attorney and nor is anyone on my staff, so I would advise you to run these questions by your attorneys in your state to ensure that they are appropriate for your state, because every state does vary a bit. But many of these undercover activists have worked under aliases. They utilize different names on farms in particular, you know, maybe smaller farms. So you ask the question, have you ever worked or earned a degree under a different name, to see what their response is, to see, you know, how if they say yes, and if so, then, you know, there should be reasons for why they've had a different name. You can ask, are you currently working for any organization that's paying you or asking you to collect information related to our company or our farm or our proprietary procedures or processes? And if, of course, they're probably going to say no, but let's just say somebody gets nervous and they do say yes, and, you know, you'd like them to provide that name and contact information. You should put that in writing and use that question in an interview process. And again, pay close attention to how they respond, the body language, if they look uncomfortable, if they look tense in responding to that type of question. You can ask, do you own or possess any equipment, including a cell phone, that you intend to have with you during work that can collect video, audio, or still pictures? And if so, you can ask them to show you anything that they have, require that they disclose any sort of equipment that they have and document it. Again, this doesn't mean that they will obviously disclose the undercover camera, but the fact that you ask this question, again, shows that individual who's trying to be employed on your farm that you're aware, that you are tuned in to some of the tactics that they use, and you're making yourself a harder target for them to lie to or to get away with this sort of activity. And then another question that's, again, a question that really is important for you to observe body language. Have you ever observed an animal being subjected to treatment that you feel is harmful? If so, where, when, what did you do about it? So again, if you can read a lot into the answers that they give, the body language that they express when answering these sorts of questions. Train your current employees, your long-time employees, to be your eyes and ears and report suspicious behaviors. So if they see anything, if they see somebody out of context in a location that they're not supposed to be in for work, ask them to go up and contact that person. Oh, can I help you? Or your job is over here, but you're over here with the animals. So what are you doing? So making that contact will definitely create a bit of a scare for the individual. Ask them what they're doing, and then notify management that these employees were not where they were supposed to be, or that strangers showed up on the farm, and so forth. Don't let it go by, because usually if somebody shows up that you're not expecting, or they're in places that they're not supposed to be for their job, they're there for the wrong reasons. Again, some of the, if you've hired someone, some characteristics to look for, or to train your long-time trustworthy employees to look for. Those people who come in early, stay late, normally we think of that as a very positive work ethic. But again, just monitor those employees, make sure that you know what they're doing if they are coming in early or staying late for work. The people who volunteer for the less desirable jobs in order to gain access to the animals. Many of these videos we've seen place animals in positions or in situations that they would never be in a normal work environment. So ensuring that people who are volunteering for some of those jobs that would give them that access, while you might think, wow, it's so nice that this kid decided to volunteer to do this, this makes my life a lot easier. Again, be sure that you're monitoring to make sure that he or she's not doing the wrong thing. Often people are hired on farms to do jobs that have nothing to do with the animals, but if they are, and then they start asking questions like, you know, I really would like to work with the animals, that's a huge red flag and has happened over and over on many of the farms. somebody who asks a lot of questions about, oh, do you guys have security and do you have cameras and what's the schedule of the managers? Pay attention to those types of questions where they're trying to obtain a lot of detailed information about situations or tools that would be used normally to monitor them, so that they, you know, it's a red flag just that they are asking lots of questions about that type of information. And then if somebody all of a sudden says, I need some time off, I've got a sick relative in Europe, you do not know how many times that excuse has been used, where they need to fly to Italy or they need to fly to England, or they need to fly somewhere to, you know, even far away within the United States, and it's very suddenly. Check that excuse, check the reason for that need to leave quickly, because that, again, every single one of these 82 videos, the individual has left employment under some excuse, or they just leave without showing back up the next day with no notice because they don't need your paycheck. They're going to get a paycheck from the animal rights group. Some other suspicious activities that we've seen lately include unexpected visitors showing up, often dressed in suits and ties, stating that they are there to check the animals for disease. But these are individuals that have no relationship with the farm, but because they're dressed in business attire, they show up unexpectedly. It's very disarming to the owners of the farm. So it's very important that you ask for a business card, you ask for their name, their number, their employer, who sent them there, get as many details as you can. And when you say, if they ask to see the animals, the answer is absolutely no. And if they leave, be sure you take a look at what car they're driving, you know, get as many details about the individuals and about the vehicle that they have driven to your farm, and share that information with your local law enforcement authority, but also share it with us because we are tracking these individuals. Other farms have had unexpected visitors or individuals saying that they work for this company in a different role, or they may work for one of your customer companies and they're there to do an audit. But if you weren't aware of the audit, or you weren't aware of somebody showing up, make sure before you allow these individuals in or on your property in any way that you verify their story. And do not, under any circumstances, let them into your farm around the animals in any situation unless you have verified that they are who they say they are. And again, you know, reporting that information to us so that we can add it to our database is very useful. So I'll just share with you very briefly some of the individuals that we have tracked, and unfortunately many of these people with these same names have gone from farm to farm, and businesses are unaware, farms are unaware that this is what they do. These are vagabond animal rights activists who will travel to various parts of the country to gain employment on farms. So those are a few. Here are a few more, and then we have tracked many, many more of these individuals, but these are just a few that we have. Some of the pictures and details already outlined in our Animal Rights Undercover Profile Report. We have many resources outlining these, the red flags that I've talked about, outlining some of the questions to ask in the hiring process and so forth, as well as the individuals that we've identified as undercover activists. And we're in the process of creating a farm security mobile app for Animal Ag Alliance members, and we will also have subscriptions to this service that will include things like the interview questions. Again, some of the pieces that I've talked about, but with a little more in-depth on each of these issues. We'll also be able to issue out push notifications that will send out an alert with new information when we've learned of individuals who are seeking employment on farms in certain regions. We get calls all the time from members, unfortunately, who have had individuals show up that they are confident were undercover activists seeking employment. And oftentimes they'll call and ask us, are we aware of these names or the individuals, and they are people that we have identified. So I think the Farm Security mobile app will be a very useful tool for the farm community to easily access this information. Pull up these pieces of information that I've talked about tonight right on your smartphone, your tablet, or your laptop, and have it handy during the interview process. Just very quickly, a few other things that I think are really important, again, to ensuring that your business is doing all that you can do to prevent being the featured farm on these undercover videos. And first is really train your employees, train all of your employees, long-time and new employees, ensure that they know your expectations, create written requirements that they have to sign that says they will report any signs of abuse or mishandling. Again, the activists are not going to report it, but what it does do in the end, if you have that as part of your culture and part of your formal policies for employment, is on the back end, if you are targeted by the undercover video, the media, your legislators, law enforcement, they can see that you have in writing that this is not allowed on your farm. These types of things or mistreatment that's maybe shown in a video, this is not part of your policy, it's not part of your culture, and every employee is aware of this. So, and the fact that if this individual signed a document saying that it would be reported and no mistreatment was ever reported to you, from a sort of a saving grace from a public standpoint, it helps. It helps because you are telling your employees straight up front that this is not allowed and that you expect it to be reported, and yet these individuals fail to do that. Shadow your new employees. When you hire someone, ensure that somebody who is a trustworthy employee, maybe a long-term employee, shadows that individual, kind of keeps an eye on and just monitors to make sure those red flags that we talked about are not showing up within this or by this individual. Hold employees accountable, and if they are doing things wrong, if they are in any way mistreating animals or mishandling them, either retrain them, hold them accountable, or fire them, because you cannot afford to keep people on who are not doing things right, not caring for the animals properly, and who don't have your long-term business best interests at heart. Hold employee briefings, so everybody who works for you knows what your policies are, regardless of whether or not they are involved in animal handling. If it's your accountant, if it's your secretary, if it's your office manager, ensure that they also know what your policies are, because when they leave the farm, if they're not your family members and they leave the farm and they go to the Little League or they go to the Little League game or the Rotary meeting, and they get asked questions about your farm in particular or about farming in general or the sheep industry, make sure that they have the right answers so that they can be good representatives for your industry as well. Build relationships with influential people before you need them. That means your legislators, your local county boards of supervisors, your city council members. Get to know them and make sure that they know of your farm, they know of your commitment to your animals, because when you need them isn't the first time you want them to have ever heard of you. Get to know your local law enforcement, so when you do call them and you say, we had suspicious activity at our farm today, that they understand your concerns, they understand why you are calling, and they're not just blowing it off or disregarding your concerns. And get involved in your community and talk about what your great business, your great industry, and all that you're doing to contribute to the local economy. The more we can do to take away the mystery of agriculture, the better. So having a presence on Facebook or a website, in particular those items, so when people go to look up information about the farms in their community, that you're the one that's presenting who you are, rather than the activists being the ones who present what your farm is about or what your industry is about. So have a presence, because today we go to Google for everything, to look up restaurants, to look up movies, to look up what the weather's going to be. We use the internet for everything, so make sure that you have a presence there. Regularly meet with your customers all the way up the food chain. So whether or not you're selling to a retailer, or you have a buyer, but you are a supplier to a brand name retailer, make sure that they know your business and they know your farm, because these videos often are used to create distrust and create concern with those brand companies in order to drop contracts with the farmers. Just quickly, crisis preparation. So what if? What if all of a sudden you have found that your farm is the feature of an undercover video? Do you have a communications plan in place? Do you have a spokesperson in place? Ensuring that all of your employees know who that spokesperson will be, so that when the cameras start to roll or the phones start to ring with media interviews, that not everybody is telling stories that they only know half the information about. Ensure that everybody knows who your spokesperson will be, and make sure that that person is speaking out on your behalf. There's a whole line of things that you need to do. Contact your customers immediately, and I mean all the way up the food chain, because otherwise you will lose your business with those customers unless you have done the due diligence to build those relationships in advance. Be honest with the media, and when they call and ask for a media interview, the worst thing you can do is say no comment or not return a call. Be open, be honest, explain that you don't know how this happened, but you are investigating it immediately. Invite them out to do a tour. If you think that this is not representative of your business, invite the media to come do a tour and say, this is what we normally do, this is how it's normally done. Try to get a full, uncut, unedited copy of the video with audio. Often these individuals who are involved in undercover videos are creating the sensation or creating the problem that is shown on the video, or they're taunting other employees or challenging other employees in creating a negative situation that's captured on video. You'll probably not get it. The activists have never turned over a full, uncut, unedited video to the individual farms or to the media or to law enforcement. But the fact is, you can request it, and you can encourage those other sources, law enforcement and media, to request it, so that you can see fully what the situation is that led to these problems shown on the video. You might engage a third-party expert review panel. A number of the industries have done that, from dairy to the poultry industries and pork industry. And again, hold employees accountable. If you have employees who were involved and seen in the video, and your investigation leads you to believe that they did things that were inappropriate, you have to hold them accountable in order to keep your credibility. And then take problems, whether it's actions to prevent problems in the future, whether it's retraining, again, more in-depth hiring practices and so forth. And these are just a few slides I'll get through very quickly, but again, back to the point of having a social, a presence on the internet. It's very, very important today, whether it's social media, Facebook page, which is very simple to develop, or a little more in depth with a website. You can go to website.com, I believe, is a company that creates websites free of charge for small businesses, and they create it for you or they walk you through the process. But it really is important for you to have a presence so that you can tell your story, so that when people want to know more, that what they're finding is information you want to share about you, your business, your family, and your values, as opposed to what the activists will say. Lastly, create a culture of professionalism among the employees who work for you. Ensure that all of your employees know what your commitment is. Make it a very professional job, and reward them for being professional in how they handle your animals and how they work for your business. And these are some examples. Cooper Farms in Ohio has done a great job with creating a kind of a new mindset and culture among its employees. Fair Oaks Farms in Indiana, again, they're very public. They've created a great presence online, and we just encourage you to take a look at those. And there are many, many other great examples out there, but those are just a couple of companies that really are going the extra mile to create a very public-facing presence to help share information about this great industry. And I'll just close by saying thank you very much for the opportunity tonight. I know I've shared a lot of information over the last hour, and look forward to your questions and encourage you to join our efforts and also join us on social media to help get information out about animal agriculture.
Thank you, Kay. That was an excellent presentation. You hit on a lot of key points there on the do's and don'ts of hiring and doing things the right way. I want to once again remind our listeners that you can submit questions using the question box on your dashboard there just by typing them in, and we have some that have been submitted, and I'll get to those here in a moment. You can also ask your question directly to Kay if you have a microphone attached to your computer. Simply raise your hand, and there should be a little hand showing up in the top left part of your dashboard, and if you click on that, I'll see that you have your hand up, and I can unmute your microphone and you can talk directly with Kay. So with that, let me go ahead and ask the first question if you're ready for that, Kay.
Sure.
Okay, somebody said, how do you determine whether or not their references are just shells of people or whatever, even if you get a live person on the other end?
Well, that's a very good question. You can't always guarantee that you are getting that, but I think a couple of things. I think one is the phone number that's provided for that reference. Again, using the internet, I use White Pages reverse lookup for phone numbers all the time, because our phones in our office have caller ID, and sometimes we'll get phone calls from numbers very frequently. I don't know who they are, and they won't leave voicemail messages, so I'm always curious. So it's White Pages reverse phone lookup, and very often that will identify either a business or the location where those phone numbers are located. The other thing is, the names of the farms. Again, using the internet, look them up and see if they really are legitimate farms and businesses, and if when they answer the phone, how I don't know if they'll answer with a business name, but again, I think a lot of your initial due diligence is just by doing a little bit of research on the internet.
Okay, thank you. We did have a couple of people ask about, can I get a copy of this presentation? I could not write fast enough. I'll answer that one. Yes, we will be posting a recording of the presentation and also a file of the slides so that you can look at that information there. And I assume from your comments, Kay, that a lot of this stuff is on your website also in various formats, correct?
Yes, right.
Okay. So all people who registered, and certainly everybody who's on here this evening, will get a follow-up email with the links to those resources available to them. Another question, are more activists targeting larger farms?
It is a real mix of farms. I think people tend to think that they are larger farms, but actually there have been a number that are smaller, but they are suppliers to a brand, whether it's a brand company, a food service company, a retailer, or a restaurant. And if you sell anywhere up the food chain, I think maybe you don't know the answer to that, who your ultimate end user is of your product, but I think I would encourage you to find that information out, because if your product is going through various distributions but ultimately going to a brand of any kind, retailer, restaurant, food service company, retailer of clothing, it's extremely important that you are a bigger target regardless of your size. So we've seen a real mix of the farms. Some are small and some are larger farms, but it is not a guarantee that it is because you're small that you will not be targeted. And in fact, I would say, again, if you know that you sell up the chain to a brand, maybe even the smaller you are, the bigger target, because you don't necessarily have all those checks and balances or employees that, for each individual job that's needed to be done.
Okay, good. Excellent question just came in on in this day and age with agritourism and small family operations, running those types of operations. Says, we are open for tours and don't employ anyone that is not in our family. What should we be aware of or look for?
That's a very good one. If you are open for agritourism, I mean, again, I think doing your due diligence up front to ensure that what the public is seeing is that you have someone there to answer questions that come up. I think most of the misinformation, at least by the consumers, is because they really don't understand agriculture. They don't understand animal husbandry. As far as if you have tourists who maybe are activists potentially there with either cameras or undercover cameras, that's a little harder, because if you are open like that and you don't have any policies about people taking pictures, I would just be very mindful when you see that you are watching and monitoring really the people who are on the farm to see if there are any odd behaviors, if they're wandering off the farm away from the family members who are giving the tour, or trying to get into buildings or get into places where the animals are that they shouldn't be. So I would never allow somebody just to wander on the farm unattended. That's, I guess, the first thing, and then just really ensuring that your family members are aware of the potential threats, and so that they are kind of looking for those red flags or looking for people who are in places they shouldn't be.
Okay, very good. And we have another question. This is along the lines of something that I had too, working at a university, but you mentioned contacting universities for info on proper animal welfare. However, some universities, including vet schools, are being infiltrated by activists. How are we, as producers, going to determine what info is good?
Well, at first, American Sheep Industry Association, so specifically for the sheep industry, but I would say the national organization for all of the various farm animal industries, have animal care guidelines that really create kind of that checklist of things that you should do and maybe not do, and proper handling. So at first I would start there. And then we actually, I'm sure also those associations and we, the Animal Ag Alliance, we have a list of third-party experts or individuals who we have identified as being those trustworthy resources at universities that are specialists in animal behavior, animal care and handling, and who we feel do have the best interests at heart of the farm community. So, start with those contacts. Again, maybe your state association or the national association. I'm just kind of assuming it's sheep. And or contact us, and we're happy to provide the list of those sort of experts that we feel are trustworthy, and certainly would be, I think, be willing to help individuals out with implementing the best guidelines.
As a follow-up to that, when you get interns from a university, should you put them through the same rigorous screening process that you would a regular employee?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. We've had an intern program at the Animal Ag Alliance now for about 17 years, and kind of back to that question about, if you have individuals who've listed references for farms, again, use of social media often tells you way more than you might just learn about an individual or about a farm or a business by their website. Obviously, the website is controlled, and it presents the image that we all, that any organization would want to have presented. But then the individuals that you're looking to hire, they're often much more honest about who they are and their opinions when they post Facebook posts or Twitter or Instagram, any of the social media. But Facebook, I would say, is probably the one that most people are more familiar with. And again, for those on that are attending the webinar tonight, if you're not comfortable or familiar with these social media venues, Facebook and Twitter and so forth, I encourage you to try to become at least familiar, whether or not you engage. I will say I don't personally do a whole lot of posting on any of these social media sites. The Animal Ag Alliance does. I have staff that do that. I'm at that age that it's all kind of a mystery, and last week I did my first tweet on my own, but I had to call my teenage daughter and say, okay, am I doing this right? I'm not comfortable myself, but I am comfortable monitoring, and you can look up individuals, you can look up, do searches on these, and we'll pull up a lot of information about people and absolutely vet them on social media, because that's when they typically, you see who they really are and what their personal interests are, personal causes are, and their activities.
Well, we do have a social media question here. It says, how would you respond to animal care questions on your Facebook page from lurkers related to farming with animals that turn out to be negative targeting in relation to farming? Should you just delete it?
If it's somebody you are completely convinced that is, no matter what you do, that they're not going to respond, that you're not going to influence their decision, then or if it's inappropriate, if it's using foul language, or it's completely inappropriate to have on your site, then yes, I would say delete it. If it's somebody who has a legitimate question, but maybe they're coming at it from an angle that appears to not be very positive, respond positively. The worst thing that I think we can do as an industry is to argue back and fight back and be angry and present that sort of an ugly side of who we are, or the anger that we know we're feeling inside, but to present it and to stoop to their level, it makes us look bad. And so we have to keep those posts on social media positive. But yeah, absolutely, if it's something that's really ranting and negative and hate-filled, which we often hear at the Animal Ag Alliance, we kind of take it as our badge of honor that we're doing our jobs right, and on behalf of the people that we're supposed to be doing, we're making the other side upset. But we don't approve posts that are unethical or inappropriate or threatening in any way. But those that we feel we can influence and respond positively, do that. Say, oh yeah, well, I understand your question, or I understand your concern. Here's what we do, and here are all the things that we do to ensure appropriate care for our animals.
Okay. Time for just a couple more quick questions. One of them was, what tactics do animal activists use to stage animal abuse, actions that would never be a part of normal management?
Often the animals are in positions or in locations that they would never be in a normal work environment, and there have been a number of those types of videos. Some that I'm familiar with the specific cases where the undercover activist was helping another employee do his or her job, or was assigned to help the employee move an animal that was sick, a very large animal, and failed to help, and therefore the person, the full-time employee, the regular employee, did something out of frustration because she couldn't get the animal to do what she needed it to do on her own, and the other individual, the activist, stood by and watched, refusing to help. That created another situation. Another time, the activists may pay off employees who are susceptible to payments, to do things the wrong way, to mishandle an animal on purpose because either they are getting paid extra money to do it, or in some cases where they've been taunted or challenged, or, oh, hey, this is just a stupid this, that, or that other animal, and this is coming from the animal rights activist, all the while just, getting somebody sort of juiced up and saying, oh yeah, you're right, let's just, it doesn't matter. And then all of a sudden, that's being captured on film. You don't hear the activists because they will delete the audio, and they put their whole little narrative in there. In a lot of these videos, we've seen pieces of film spliced together where in one of the videos we exposed that PETA did, it wasn't even the same breed of animal. In one part of the video it was a dairy calf, and in another part of the video it was a beef calf. And now to the untrained, average consumer, they might not notice the difference. But to people in our industry, absolutely we're able to notice the difference. And yet that video was pieced together and presented as if it's the same animal.
Yeah. Well, time for one last quick question, and that is there a resource for protection for farm services rather than farm owners, such as shearers? I would imagine employing shearers can be handled much like other workers.
Yes. I mean, again, if you're hiring shearers, then I would absolutely vet them, go through all of these, steps that I've outlined here to ensure they are who they say they are, that they have good reputations, that they have done good work for other people. And it really is important that you're calling, checking the references, and double checking these individuals and what their reputations are. Any sort of temporary crews that are brought in just for seasonal work and so forth, the same thing. I mean, it really is extremely important that these individuals and the groups or companies that are providing the service are vetted to ensure that they don't have any negative strikes against them for animal welfare concerns.
Okay, and the person who asked that has their hand up, so I'm going to go ahead and it must have something to follow up on that. Amy,
okay.
Are you on the line here? Amy, are you there? Oh, she must not. Okay, well, with that, we'll go ahead and draw this to a close. Once again, I want to thank our speaker, Kay Johnson-Smith, for her excellent presentation and for doing such a good job of handling all these questions that came in, and thank all our participants for asking the questions. Certainly a very informative evening. Kay, you going to say something?
Jay, I was just going to say you can go to our website, and my email is on there. I don't know if you'll put it with the video, the presentation, but feel free for any of your attendees to also connect with us by email, and I'm happy to try to answer any other questions that may come in later if you'd like.
Oh, excellent. So is it okay if I just add that to the follow-up email that goes out?
Yes.
Okay, I will
That'd
do
be
that
fine.
then. Okay, I want to once again thank everybody for attending tonight. We do have some other webinars coming up later this summer, and I want to encourage you to join us for those. On June 23rd, we'll have Richard Earhart of Michigan State University speaking on nutritional management of reproduction. And then on August 25th, we'll have Dave Nodder of Virginia Tech University speaking on developing and using breeding objectives. So look for those advertisements to come out in the near future, and I encourage you to join us for those. I always enjoy these webinars and all the great questions that we get from the attendees. So with that, I'll close by just thanking Kay Johnson-Smith again for her excellent presentation, and thanking the American Sheep Industry Association and the Rebuild the Sheep Inventory Committee for providing funding for these webinars. And I wish everybody a pleasant evening and the best of luck.